So welcome, 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 welcome. Today, Sunday, was the new month of Nisan. And so it's 2 weeks till Seder night, till Passover starts. And we all know that Passover is the holiday of freedom, where there's an idea, a mystical idea in Jewish thinking that time is circular. As much as it's linear, that we sort of go through time, and we come back to certain energies that exist in the universe at certain times. So at Yom Kippur, there's an energy of forgiveness in the air. And in the air of Passover is obviously an energy of redemption, an energy of freedom. And we're going to explore a little bit what freedom means to us personally. We are supposed to think of ourselves as having been redeemed from Egypt, but also we're living our lives here in 2021 with all that's going on in all of our lives. Sorry, let me just, and we are experiencing our own versions of freedom. Mitzrayim, when we came out of Egypt, the word in Hebrew for Egypt is Mitzrayim, which means constraint, which means boundaries. So when we were redeemed from Egypt, we were on some level taken, those things that constrained us and bound us up were released, and we were free on some level to become what we wanted to be. And we have that capacity now. So I think it behooves us to think about that. We're 2 weeks out, and maybe reflect on our own journeys through life, what it is that holds us back, what it is that we're constrained by, what it is that prevents us from being more of who we are and what we can be in the world, what holds us back. So I invited 4 wonderful ladies who live in Rhode Island to speak to us and to think a little bit on their own about what freedom means to them, and what how they interpret it, how they think about it, how they process it, and what they're going to bring with them into this season. So I'm very excited that they all agreed and here they are, and we have a wonderful, wonderful audience here to listen to them, and we'll record it and send it out to those people who can't be here. So I'm going to introduce my friend, Barbara Fields, who came on a trip to Israel with me and a few other ladies in 2014, I believe. And you know, we've stayed strong friends ever since. Barbara was born and raised in New York. She moved to Boston to go to college and spent most of her adult life in New England. She moved to Rhode Island to pursue a job in the early 1990s, and she's been in the field of housing and community development, and she's currently serves as president and CEO of the Greater Worcester Community Foundation. She did serve as CEO in the Rhode Island Housing, and she was a presidential appointee in the Obama administration. Obama, if you're not muted, please mute yourself. She started and ran the Rhode Island Office of Local Initiatives Support Corporation for 20 years. She is the daughter of 2 German Holocaust refugees, and she is the proud mother of 2 children, Daniel 22 and Nina 19. And I will hand us over to Barbara, who will address us for 10, 12, something like that minutes. And then what we'll do, the plan is to have each speaker speak, and then we'll come together a little end at the end if anybody has any comments or thoughts or something they'd like to ask or something they'd like to reflect back on. So that's the way the program will work. So Barbara, you're up.
Thank you. Thank you, Alyssa, for inviting me. I did reflect back that it is this winter, this spring, 7 years ago, that you and I engaged in building a friendship. We knew each other, we passed each other on the ellipticals at the gym, but there is something special about 7 in Judaism. And so I think it's interesting that on the 7th anniversary of the start of a different phase of our relationship, you invited me to this. So thank you. I'm grateful to be here and to continue our friendship and to see so many familiar faces and new faces today. I appreciate it. So I'm going to talk about something today I haven't ever talked about publicly. So soon after I divorced, which is 16 years ago now, I wrote about the process of getting divorced in the Jewish Voice and Herald. And I talked about the incredible ritual that I experienced when I went to the Beit Din in Boston to get my religious get. It was a positive and an affirming experience that I hadn't expected, particularly when the rabbis said Mazel Tov. But at the time I felt sad and a little bit ashamed what it was going through. So I learned a lot about Judaism, but it contrasted with some of the stuff I was going through in the Jewish community of my daily life. And I felt a lot of social isolation and lack of acceptance. And I wrote about a little bit about that, about not always getting the same invitations for Shabbat dinner. And my friendships changed and new ones emerged. When the article was written, a lot of women I had never met reached out to me and said it really spoke to them and it allowed them to share with their dear ones something that they were going through. It revealed their own truths. So they shared it with their mother or a cousin. But what I didn't write about, and I have never talked about, was the financial anxiety and the underlying sheer terror that kept me up at night. How would I provide for my children? Would I be able to stay in my home? Would they be able to stay at JCDS in the community that we were just entering and learning to love? Would I be able to afford to send them to Jewish summer camps and pay for their bar and bat mitzvahs? What about sports and tutoring and college? Now, some 16 years later, I know that having worked incredibly hard, I have not so much work at work, which was part of it, but I've learned to free myself a little bit from the financial terror that I felt. I still worry about it so much, but it's so much more under my control. Despite lack of any substantive assistance from my ex-husband, I managed to pay for the things I just mentioned and more. And if he'd be able to save, my financial advisor says it's enough so that when I decide I'll be able to retire. I don't quite believe that yet, but I keep listening to him. I learned to take it day by day and to breathe in and out and to ask for help when I could. It's been a journey to freedom, and I've never discussed this publicly. But I also know that I'm blessed. Given my life's work in community work and social change, I realize maybe more than others that I'm certainly so much better off. And I kept remembering that than most Americans. I never worried about feeding my children or housing them or providing health care. And my children, Baruch Hashem, are healthy children. And I know that there's so many blessings in that. But and yet, sleepless nights, teary phone calls with the dear girlfriends who were and are the soul circle of my life network, the help of an unbelievably fabulous therapist who unfortunately moved out of Rhode Island. And yes, hard work at a job that I happen to love, long hours, and a little bit of luck, a little bit of blessing. And here I am. I'm still worried. Wouldn't be Jewish if I wasn't worrying. I still have some sleepless nights and I'm still concerned, but I'm definitely more free than I was 16 years ago. And I continue to think about that journey. And is freedom ever done? Don't we need to earn it and work for it every day, every week, every month, every year? And as Alyssa said, in the circle of life, we need to work for freedom as an individual, as a family, as a community, and as a nation. I think we do, and we need to do it always. So as I think about this year and coming together and maybe being on Zoom again, say this year in peace with loved ones, next year in Jerusalem, is the prayer and hope of generations, L'dor v'dor.
Beautiful. Thank you, Lynn. Thank you, Barbara. Really, feel like I just take a moment just to, we get some hearts. Thank you for sharing. We are all honored to listen to your journey and hear what you feel free from and where you are in your journey, that there's more to go, but that you feel more free than you did. However we can all support you, we're there to support you.
Well, you have been a guiding light, Alyssa. I have to say that again. And I will let the group know we've had some very intense disagreements done in the trust of friendship that is part of the freedom I've learned over time. So thank you.
Interesting. Yeah, I guess it's free to voice your opinions, right? Both ways.
And still fall in love with you.
So we'll go through the lineup because I would like people to feel that they can participate, they can ask questions or they can reflect themselves, but I think it'd be nice to have the speakers speak first. So now we can turn our attention to Rachel Mersky Woda. Where are you in my screen? Oh, there you are, so I can look at you. So Rachel comes from a long line of Jewish educators and communal professionals She went to George Washington University, where she has an undergraduate degree in Judaic studies and a master's in education and human development. She has spent the last 25 years working with a wide variety of nonprofit organizations in many different levels, the US Holocaust Memorial Museum, Hillel's. There's a long list. And I'm just, for the matter of time, I'm not going to list all these amazing organizations that she's been working with. She's a certified Reform Jewish educator from the Union of Reform Judaism. She is associate with Mersky Jaffe and Associates, a consulting firm that helps nonprofit organizations with financial and human resource development. She's on many local nonprofit organization boards, and she lives on the East Side with her husband, Craig, and she also has two children, two sons, Jordan and Elias. And we spend time together at the JCC, and I see you and I talk to you, and now I know more about you, and I'm looking forward to hearing your words.
Thank you. It's funny, I gave you the bio from my current job, and it doesn't say what my current job is because it's on the website of our synagogue. So my current position is I'm the Director of Youth and Family Engagement at Temple Bethel. So I have a long history of education and fundraising and all this, and I love to say that my master's is in education and human development, and I literally and figuratively develop tiny humans, which is a joy. So thank you for having me. And thank you, Barbara, for your courage and sharing. It's an honor to follow you. When Alyssa reached out to me and asked me to be a part of this panel of powerhouse women, she said the question being addressed was, what do you wish you were freed from or free to do? And then I saw the marketing materials and it read it a little differently, and it said, what do I feel freed from or free to do? So when I thought about really what I wished I was freed from or free to do, I'm going to stick with that initial phrasing. My initial instinct would say, no, I don't want to do this. I don't have the time. I don't have the bandwidth to do more right now. I don't have the faintest idea what I'm freed from or free to do, or what I wish I was freed from or free to do. So I started talking about it with my husband. He noticed my frustration, and I shared with him the details of her email. And he says, you definitely should do it. You should talk about the freedom to say no. It's really hard. So here we are. Saying no does not come naturally. But why? Indulge me for a moment, ladies, and a few gentlemen I saw on the Zoom. Using the chat feature, why do we say yes? Why do we always feel the need to say yes? Tell me what you think in the chat, if you're comfortable. We don't want to let someone else down. We want to please others. Thank you, guys. We were socialized to take care of other people, sometimes because of the person asking. Thank you, Allison. You jumped ahead in my little talk. We don't want to offend anyone. The social pressure to be a good girl. Yes. Expectations. Yes. We want to do it. Sometimes we want to do it. That's right. It's interesting. The current work I'm doing, our value is in what we do for others. Thank you. The program I shepherd at the temple, we created a culture of yes. We even wrote a big article about it in E-Jewish Philanthropy. The idea that we should say yes to everybody because the expectations we have on each other, we shouldn't negatively reinforce Jewish education, that it should be, we should celebrate what everybody does in their real life. Soccer is important to some families. Okay, I'm sorry you can't come this week. We'll miss you. But we hope we'll see you next time and tell us if you won your game. You didn't, you can't make it to every Sunday. That's okay. Yes, we see you. And what creating that culture of yes did was made it possible for us to say no when we had to, which actually we rarely have to. But going back to ourselves, we're not good at it. We find it really, for me, I'll speak for myself, it's very anxiety provoking. I want to please others. I feel a pressure. I don't want to be that girl who says no. I don't want people to speak badly of me. I want to be the go-to person. I want to be known as a team player. I want to protect my reputation, which after 25 years, I think is pretty solid. So it's a practice. I'm a yogi. I love yoga. I've just recently, thanks to the pandemic, and found myself on the mat again. And what do we always say in yoga? It's a practice. You have to practice. Practice makes perfect, although I don't like the word perfect. But why should we practice becoming better at saying no? Oh, I love what Barbara wrote. When I got my Obama appointment, I asked one question in my interview with the Secretary of HUD. How do you like to say no? If we don't say no, then our yes is not as strong, not as meaningful. Absolutely. Absolutely. So why should we be better at saying no? Use the chat again and tell me. Barbara started us off. Balance. Yes, Susan, thank you. We don't need any more stress. We have to prioritize our sanity. Yes. Yes. Self-care. Yes. Yes. Boundaries, limits. What was the word we learned earlier, Alyssa, that you said Mitzrayim means?
Constraints, something that holds us
Right.
back.
A narrowing, right?
Not right.
Narrow,
Right. So authentic connection is important, obligation less so. Yes, Jill, that is so true. I saw even just today on Instagram, saying no to others is a way to say yes to yourself. Okay, but for those of us who are raised in a culture of being pleasing young Jewish women, it's not supposed to be about you, which makes it hard. It makes it hard. And there's a lot of guilt, at least for me. So in a different part of my life, I also am a trained fundraiser. And you may have heard I work for my dad, Mersky and Associates. And what he taught me, he's also a rabbi. He's pretty wise sometimes, not always. He taught me, said, when you're fundraising, no doesn't always mean no when you're asking for a gift. Sometimes it means not right now. And the way you get to that yes is how you cultivate and steward the relationship with the prospect or donor. So it doesn't surprise me if you go back in the chat, you'll see my dear friend and colleague Allison Walter said, sometimes we say yes because of who's asking. So I'm going to ask the question, are we more likely to say yes to those with whom we have a good relationship or who say yes to us? I think so. I think so. Those are the hardest people sometimes to say no to. But it is important to say no. We have to have some boundaries. So in a moment, I'm going to cut and paste 2 articles I found on this topic, and I'll share them with you. And one of them is about saying no is not a sign of weakness. The whole article is about when you're in a job interview. I think it's interesting, Barbara, that you brought up your interview with your appointment for HUD. When you're in a job interview, it's actually really not great when you say, oh, I never say no. I'm a yes person. I'll say yes to everything. You need to be able to show that you can have boundaries, and it's not a weakness. So you'll see that in one of the articles. So all I have left to say, so do you feel freed from having to say yes? No, I don't yet. Not yet. I will tell you, the first time I actually said no in a big way in my professional career was a huge weight off my shoulders when I did it. But the anxiety leading up to doing it was excruciating. And the reaction I got was really tough. In the end, it was for the best. It was the best thing, not only for me, but for the people I was saying no to. They didn't see it that way for a little while, but they got there. But it's hard. It's very hard. And I think we have to name that hard, name that it's hard. So here we are, we're marking 1 year of an existence that none of us anticipated. And a lot of people say we're in the same storm. We're not. We're in the same boat. We're not. We're in the same storm. Like Barbara said, there are people who've had really major challenges in life. And I feel lucky, like her, that, I've never had to worry about whether I can feed my children. My husband and I both are doing fine financially. We both still have our jobs. Our kids are happy and healthy. Thank God they're actually doing well in distance learning. But we're in the same storm, and it's a psychological trauma, and it's very real, and it manifests in different ways for each person. We've all heard it takes a village to get through, but when your village is distanced it's a challenge like no other. And it just makes it even harder to say yes to yourself. We all want to be redeemed from this distance and be freed from it. So here's my blessing to all of you, my wish for all of you, for all of us. Let us strive to assume goodwill of others, to not assume the worst and judge others for their choices, to give ourselves permission to grieve, scream, cry, rant before rationalizing and taking ourselves off the ledge of whatever is stressing us out. But most importantly, may we find the freedom to celebrate boundaries, to practice saying no when we need to, so we can say yes in a true way that serves ourselves and others in our community.
Very nice. Very nice. Thank you, Rachel. You know, I think what's really lovely about this discussion, Barbara, you said at the beginning you hadn't listened to any others, but I think what's really lovely is that I think we're sort of weaving things together, and the way in which you, Rachel, master educator, were kind of leading us through your journey a little bit was really kind of helping to us kind of think about our journeys as we're listening to you. So it's not just your journey. It's like, okay, well, what you know, the educational tools that you use to help us think about our journeys also and process that. So I'm enjoying this weaving together of all the different pieces. So third up is Cara. Cara, actually, I've met every year at the Chalabake. Sadly, we couldn't do it live this year, but hopefully next year, maybe we'll be able to do it live next year. So Cara is the chair of the Community Relations Council of the Jewish Alliance of Greater Rhode Island. She is a member of the executive board of the URI Hillel. She is director of professional development at URI's graduate school, where she provides professional skill building strategies and career coaching to master's and PhD students. She is also administrator director and founder of URI's Graduate Writing Center. She has served as assistant dean for career services at University of San Diego School of Law, as a tax lawyer for a large international Wall Street law firm, and a research analyst for the House Judiciary Committee on Capitol Hill. She holds a law degree from Northwestern, a BA in international relations from Tufts University. She lives in Barrington. She's a member of the wider Jewish community, obviously, and we're weaving people together. So Cara, I'm gonna hand the mic over to you. Thank you for participating in this panel.
Well, thank you, Alyssa, and I really appreciate it. And Rachel, I'm glad you said yes, so thank you for that. And I just think it's really cool that I get to be on a panel with someone who offhandedly said in the chat when I got my Obama appointment. So that's, to me, that's the coolest thing that's happened so far. That's really great. So thanks for organizing this program, Alyssa. And asking me to be a part of it. And I just want to thank you, and I'm sure from everyone else, about Core Connects Rhode Island, bringing together women of diverse Jewish backgrounds and denominations, because we can be really siloed in our own sort of Jewish circles, and your program really brilliantly allows women to come together in a safe space to reveal our common humanity rather than our differences. So I do participate in the Challah Bake every year. I bring my friends and I come, Lisa Davis, who's on this call, and Jocelyn, and lots of Kaplan and lots of people, and we participate. And we've expanded our horizons because we sit with Orthodox women who invite us for Shabbat dinner. We sat with some college students from Brown RISD Hillel, who I tried to fix my college son up with, and met mothers and daughters from around the state. So thank you for this, and for letting me meet some very cool and impressive women and talking about freedom in anticipation of Passover, my favorite holiday. So I'm sure you've heard the statistic where more Jews celebrate Passover than they do any other holiday. I guess you don't have to go to shul, and the eating part's good, and everyone's invited. So normally I have 30 to 40 people in my house, and next year hopefully we'll do that, and hope maybe some of you will come by. Who knows? But as for freedom, I want to talk about the freedom that the established Jewish community has given my family to be able to pursue our best personal and professional selves. And what I mean by established is kind of the old line structures and organizations that have sustained us as Jews, particularly in the diaspora, for so many years. And I refer to Jewish federations, JCCs, temples, their membership, sisterhoods, Havaras, Jewish publications, all those kinds of things. These types of organized institutions, we take them for granted, that our communities allow us to become a part of them wherever we go in our country and in the world. And this is the type of, I say it's freedom because this is the type of structure that has allowed my family to move back and forth across the country multiple times for my husband's professional reasons. We've moved to the upper Midwest, we moved to Southern California, we moved to New Jersey, we moved to New York, we moved to Rhode Island, we move. And having established Jewish organizations in place has given our family the ability to confidently move places, secure in the knowledge that we could always tap into a wonderful waiting Jewish community. And we have, especially here in Rhode Island, and there's always been warmth and familiarity and happiness to soften our landing. And maybe we can talk afterwards or not if it's too much of a downer and we're going a different direction. But, you know, I do lament that interest and commitment to these types of traditional institutions is waning, you know, not only in younger generations, but in our current generation, underestimating the importance that these type of structures free us to be. So in terms of the moves and the freedom, which is after practicing law in a large Wall Street law firm for 5 years, both my husband and my husband decided he wanted to teach law. And so for his academic career, we moved from the Upper East Side very happily to Madison, Wisconsin with a 3-week-old. Then we moved to Princeton for him to do his doctorate, and then to San Diego where he taught and took a dean position, and here to Rhode Island where he's in a deanship here at UMass Law School in Dartmouth, Mass. And you've probably heard the old adage about the great thing about Judaism is that you can go comfortably anywhere in the world with your prayer book and, you know, be able to walk into a service because you know there's going to be a Musaf portion and a Torah service and an Oneg or whatever there is. Well, that's kind of how we feel about being able to move everywhere, you know, with this freedom that it gives us. And so with the contemplation of every move that we've done around the country, I would figure out who I needed to contact at the JCC, at the temple, at the Jewish preschool. And, you know, when we moved to Madison, I called the Jewish Federation, teeny tiny, like one person, but they connected me with a Jewish mom, and then we got a Jewish mom play group together, and they're still my friends, you know, 25 years later. Knowing we would land softly again gave me the template for moving to Princeton, joining a Jewish preschool and finding a community. And then when my husband got his doctorate and deciding on where to live, we had offers from, we did, because I went through it together, from lots of places, including Ole Miss in University of Mississippi in Oxford, which is a great school. And I thought, I'm just going to pull out my Jewish playbook and do this again. There's got to be a community there. But there wasn't, you know, at least 23 years ago, 20 something years ago, there was no temple. There was certainly no JCC, and there was no Hillel, surprisingly. And I called the campus and I said, what do the Jewish students do? And I got passed around to like 4 or 5 people. And so I did not feel free then. I felt constrained, and I felt disappointed that this sort of easy structure that I had to do everything before was failing me. But we decided to pass and take another option and go to lovely San Diego, and that was a wonderful place. And we plugged into the Jewish preschool and the JCC and sent my kids to the new Jewish sleepaway camp in the San Bernardino Mountains. And And the temple was there by it, Shelley. They loved going there, and it was a wonderful place, and it gave us room, the Jewish community, to actualize both personally and professionally. And I have to say, and I'd love to hear from you all, you know, I've seen other friends who either aren't Jewish or are Jewish, but don't tap into these structures. And I find that sometimes it can be hard for people that don't feel an immediate community to make these sorts of moves. And they're afraid they're going to not meet like-minded people. And I understand that that's a real thing, but I felt the freedom to do it because of these structures. And then finally, to the magical land of Rhody, which is where we are now. And it is a magical and wonderful place. And I think it's good we keep it a secret that way. Although I did hear there's someone from Ottawa on the call, so maybe she'll spread it around. When my husband was offered the deanship at UMass Law School in Dartmouth, Mass, and we wanted to be closer to our Mid-Atlantic families, you know, my son was going into his sophomore year in high school, and I saw there was a temple in Barrington, and I saw that the head of membership, you know, usually an extroverted, friendly person, was Susan Ginsburg, and called her up, and she called me right back and told me where I could get a realtor, where to live, that it's a great community, and she's a great friend of mine, and, you know, took me right under her wing and invited me and including me. And I said, you know, is anywhere do you have know any people with school age kids? Even before I moved, I was sitting in my house looking at a canyon in San Diego. She connected me with Jocelyn Kaplan, who now is one of my best friends in the world. And we celebrate all of our holidays together. And then we wanted to join the Conservative Temple, and I called the head of membership, and they introduced me to Deborah Nassau, who's on this call, and her husband Jack, and we're all friends. And I did this almost all not even being here because I was able to plug in. So we've been here, and Lisa Davis is on this call, who also makes my life great. We've been here 6 happy years, and I personally, for my own actualization, tapped into the established Jewish structure. I got here, I picked up the Jewish newspaper in the Barrington Bagel Store, and I saw there was a Rosh Chodesh event happening, and I went by myself, and I was standing there with a plate, and Sharon Gaines, who happened to be president of the Jewish Federation or the Alliance at that time, saw me standing there, took me over to a table, sat me down, and somehow put me on the board the next year of the Jewish Alliance, and there I are. So I don't anticipate any more moves in the future, but if there will be, I do know that the established Jewish community will give me and my family the freedom to do so and to happily land on the other side. And I look forward to celebrating more at the end of this month during Passover. Thank you, Alyssa.
Thank you. Thank you. So interesting. Thank you. I'm getting a lot of applause here, a lot of silent applause. It's so interesting that, I think Rhode Island's so small, but the Jewish people are so small, and that you can call somebody wherever, you never met them, but we're a mishpacha, we're all big family. And I think that really is what Core Connect is trying to do. We're family. Like, we shouldn't be so focused on all the things that we do differently. Let's try to find the things that we have in common and raise ourselves up, like raise the boat up. I think, Rachel, you talked about the storm that we're all in. Well, on some level, maybe, I don't know, maybe we are in the same boat, because if the boat stays afloat, we all stay afloat. We're all kind of holding each other up on some level. Maybe we can talk about it some more. So thank you, Cara, for your reflections, for your whirlwind. I feel like I've just traveled all over the country in 10 minutes. But that you had the freedom to do that, and that where you went, you felt free to land and to comfortably establish yourself so quickly. Thank God for the Jewish people. Stephanie. So Stephanie was supposed to go on a trip to Israel. I was leading last summer. Sadly, we didn't get to go, which was super sad. I've met Stephanie mostly actually through other people here on the call. Alison, good friends of Alison, I believe. So Stephanie, I guess, has a famous Rhode Island name, Trachtenberg. She lives in Lincoln, Rhode Island, so now we really are traversing the whole state with her husband, Mark, and 2 sons, 10 and 12 years old. She's passionate about helping others achieve their goals through positive transformation. This cause drives both her professional life as a marketing PR director and in her personal life through her community volunteering. When she's not trying to change the world, she enjoys hanging out with her kids to keep her spirit young, making music with her husband to keep her heart joyful, and cardio kickboxing to keep her body strong. So we're all very intimidated already, Stephanie.
Thank you, Alyssa. Thank you so much for the opportunity to share what freedom means to me. And thank you to the lovely ladies before me who shared. It's wonderful to be on this panel with you. Thanks to everyone who came here. It's really such a fascinating thing to share what freedom means to me and different perspectives and stories that we can all relate to. So to me, freedom means dancing in the supermarket. Nothing could cause a scene, but if I'm moved, I'll bop down the aisle, because to me, freedom is living without fear of judgment.
It's like it was coming on.
Freedom is being myself in any situation and ultimately not worrying about what other people think of my actions. Note that's different than not worrying how other people will feel from my actions. It's a very important distinction. This doesn't give me permission to say whatever I want to whomever I want. We always need to be mindful and empathetic and, of course, respectful. But freedom to me is knowing and believing there's no right or wrong way to do something. There's no right way to parent, to wear your hair, to dress, to post on social media. So I don't edit myself out of fear of what people will think. Being judged by society, our friends, is something we only suffer in our heads, and it holds us back. So recognizing this and living this takes practice. Just as Rachel pointed out, it's a practice. Likely starts with unlearning much of what we experienced in our youth. We've all been to middle school and high school. For example, I shared with a friend what I was planning to talk about, and she said, well, it's a legit fear of being awkward in a social situation, wearing something weird. You could risk your social status. And so I asked her, are these people truly your friends then? Do you want to invest your time and energy in people who can't see you for who you are? Yep, sounds like high school, right? So I took a look back at myself, and for the record, I didn't live my life without fear or judgment. I arrived for my whole life. I arrived here about 4 or 5 years ago. In my childhood, I certainly held back a lot because I was afraid of being judged. I didn't have a very communicative home. I didn't feel comfortable or safe to share my feelings or fears. I spent a lot of time worrying that my feelings or actions would cause damage to someone else in my family, which is probably a common issue that kids of divorced parents have. On top of that, I remember kids in elementary school calling me weird, and that kind of thing sticks with you. I also moved a lot. I changed schools a lot. I was quiet. I shied away from making friends. And at 16, I did discover a crutch. That thing we all try at some point that loosens us up, takes away our inhibitions. Yeah, it's alcohol. I never abused it to the extent of being an alcoholic or anything, but I definitely discovered at a young age that it was a crutch, certainly in social situations. It became an excuse for me then to open up, and inevitably it did cause damage to myself and my loved ones. So December 14th, 2014 was the last night I had a drink. I'd finally recognized that no matter how hard I tried, the pattern would repeat itself until I dug up that nasty root that had been planted long ago. The fear of judgment was one of them, along with shame, feelings of unworthiness, but that's all for another time. So the social experiment began. Could I go out to a bar with friends, not drink, and still be witty and entertaining? Of course I could. But more importantly, I was challenged with being authentic in uncomfortable situations. And I discovered what being real and unedited means. This in itself became incredibly freeing. I wanted more of this feeling, so it became a practice in my daily life. I remember a time about 3 years ago. I was on a work trip to Hong Kong, and some colleagues of mine gathered around the hotel bar lobby. This included some intimidating executives. there I was without a drink. There was a guy at the piano playing and singing Billy Joel in the best American accent he could muster. How could I not sing along? I could see that others with a few drinks in their hands had started to sing along to the chorus, but how could I do it? How? I took a leap. I trusted myself. I believed this felt right for me, even though it was scary. So not only did I open my mouth and start singing, but I ended up inspiring others to sing louder, to come sit down and join us, request more songs. It became a magical, memorable night, and it was incredibly freeing. One of my colleagues next to me, who was visibly reluctant to share the same level of exuberance that night, said to a friend, somewhat directed at me, "I wish I was on what she's on." And while I know she was probably judging me and maybe thinking I was on coke or something, because she saw me turn down the waitress multiple times, it was one of the greatest compliments she could have given me. And I thought for a moment, should I interject and tell her I was stone sober? But I knew then what I knew now. It didn't matter to me what she thought. I'll pause here and come back to this because if this woman had been a senior executive, I may have said something to set the record straight. But it's a continued practice and something I want to teach my kids too, because if you're like me, you want to give your kids everything you never had and tell them all the watch outs you didn't hear. At the same time, I believe that the best thing I can do for my children is to teach them to be independent and not over provide and proactively solve other problems so they don't become entitled and helpless in the real world. So a couple of years ago, my older son, Sanford, I think he was in 5th grade at the time, we're out at a store and he had seen some rainbow shoelaces that he wanted for his sneakers. As he picked them out, I was proud of him for choosing something he liked because the kid never cares about fashion. And he's actually debated me about why do I have to wear my clothes right side out or not backwards? And I told him the reality. People judge you based on how you look. So do you want to be seen as someone who's perhaps intelligent enough to know the difference between inside out and right side out? That resonated with him. So anyway, he picked out the laces and the last thing I wanted to do was edit him. But of course, a little red flag went up and worried that he might be judged by his peers for his choice. So sure enough, he came home from school that first day he wore them and he said he was teased. Not terribly, but he didn't want to wear them anymore. And I told him, you know, when you picked those out, I worried that you could be judged for them, but I wanted it to be your choice. You just have to be okay with taking the risk that you may be judged and decide if you're okay with that or not. So we agreed that if I ever worried about a fashion choice he was making that might cause harsh judgment or teasing, that I would raise the flag, but ultimately it's his choice to be okay with that potential consequence or not. And over time, I've learned that he doesn't care about fashion overall, but does see how certain choices express himself, and he's found things that he likes. Of course, there's a time and a place for appropriate. Fortunately, he seems to embrace the whole suit and tie look when applicable. So fast forward a couple of years, Sanford wanted to get his ears pierced, one ear pierced for his 12th birthday. From talking to him about why he wanted this and why it was important to him, I didn't even need to raise the flag. And I was proud to take him to the piercing pagoda. So throughout my experimentation with being free from judgment, I've discovered that this also gives me freedom to fail. Because what does failure really mean? Who's deciding this? Maybe you've heard the phrase, if you're going to fail, fail forward, which to me means learn from this failure and move forward, but perhaps in a different direction. So I found that while in my personal life, I was learning to be free from judgment, in my professional life, I was learning about being free to fail. Because in your career, there are certainly consequences if you say or do the wrong thing. There's definitely a worry about applying the wrong strategy or sharing the wrong comment in a meeting. So earlier in my career, when I started at Hasbro, I had the opportunity to meet one of our team executives one-on-one. He was highly regarded, intelligent, but also kind. He told me to ask him anything. Of course, I was still super intimidated. But I asked him, how is it in meetings you always seem to know exactly what to say? You always seem to make the right call. And he replied, I trust my gut and I practice it. I probably don't say the right thing 100% of the time, but as you practice, you learn. And this changed everything for me. This was something I could do. When I believe in something and it's grounded in some sort of fact or insight, I could share it. And no matter what happens, I could learn from it. And so I started to do this. And the more I opened up my mouth, honestly, the more success I had in my career. So in both my personal and professional life, the practice of being free from judgment means taking risks. And I've become a more whole, authentic person, and I've been more successful in my career too. It's truly a practice. You can't wake up, change a behavior, and expect it to stick. Funny enough, just a couple weeks ago, I sat down at the piano to play again. Since I married a keyboardist, I hardly ever do this, even though I have played as long as I can remember. But song after song I picked up, I stumbled and grew incredibly frustrated. So I decided I would choose one song to master. Every day or so, I would come back to it and practice, maybe 5 minutes, maybe 20. And what started to surprise me was that each time I came back to the piano, I was better than the last time. Meanwhile, I'd been waiting for this magical moment in my 20 minutes of practice when it would suddenly all click. So it wasn't honestly until I was asked to speak on this panel that I truly realized the practice of living without judgment has brought me freedom and success as a human being and as a professional. So if there's something holding you back in your life, practice a new approach and trust that you'll get there. Thank you.
Wow, that's it. We've got it. We know what to do. Now we're all going to do it. Stephanie, that was really
that was amazing. And it reminded me of a poster I used to have in my office of Nelson Mandela. And one of his quotes that I love is, "I never lose. I win or I learn." And I think that's what you're, right?
It's true. Yeah, you have to be willing to take the risk. But remember, the consequence is in your head mostly. So if you can be free from that, it's really impactful.
Please feel free to unmute yourself and introduce yourself if you'd like to comment, question, reflect, share with us what you are working on in terms of your being free from or free to, or want to be unconstrained from. I remember once I was at a women's Seder that was at Bethel, and they had this little practice where you wrote down on a piece of paper the things you wanted to be freed from, and then they would go burn them. You know, you burn them on a bonfire somewhere. I don't think the fire was there, but that was the idea, that to express what it is that you want to free yourself from, that you want to stop it preventing you being more authentic and more real and taking risks and putting yourself out there. If you burnt it, maybe that was a visual representation that could help you in your way. So please join the conversation. You all listened so attentively. We'd love to hear your voices if you'd like to chime in. You have to introduce yourself, Myra. Tell us who you are.
I'm Myra Paul. I'm a longtime Rhode Islander. I belong to Agudas Achim up in Attleboro, having done the Shoal circuit elsewhere. But I want to comment on what Cara was talking about moving. My husband's job moved us cross country to Washington State. It's the Wild West, but there are Jews everywhere if you know where to look. And so found a beautiful Reconstructionist community in Olympia, which was 45 minutes. I mean, in Rhode Island, 45 minutes gets you to another state. But I have a wonderful Jewish community over there, and they know people who are in this community on my East Coast. And so now I have a whole national network of Reconstructionist Jewish community. The other thing I wanted to say is, Stephanie, my daughter is Risa Paul Flores, who was a friend of your husband's in high school. Exactly.
Trachtenberg to know everybody.
Exactly.
It's Rhode Island too.
And that's what I love about the Rhode Island Jewish community, because you're never really more than one person away from knowing about everybody else.
True. Anybody else have any, would like to share with us their thoughts on their own freedom moving into this season of redemption and Passover? I think one thing that,
I'm Roberta. Hi. I
yeah,
just love
Roberta,
what you- I
introduce
just love
yourself,
what
tell
you-
us who you are.
I'm Roberta. I just love what you said about women supporting each other and we're in the boat together, because too often, you know, people try to up one another. I was just reading in the Jewish values book tonight. You know, being Jewish means supporting each other. And I think we as a community of women have to support each other and not say things about each other and not put anyone down. Just lift each other up, be authentic. It's okay not to wear makeup when you're out. It's okay, you know, to ask for help. And I love that we're just being authentic here and honest. And that's what I have.
It's so funny because all day, even for work this morning when I ran religious school, I like was in a fleece and I wasn't wearing makeup because I was like, I'm just too tired. And I put makeup on for tonight. And now I wish I didn't even bother, Roberta. But thanks.
Well, you can mix it up, Rachel. I left on my sweatshirt, my hoodie, and put on lipstick. So there you go.
All right, I'm wearing my PJ pants, all right?
Yeah.
But I'm okay with that.
No one's had to wear anything but sweatpants for a long time. Yes, Lisa's on here saying she's a fan of makeup. That's a good move, Lisa.
I'm feeling like there's this sort of underlying conversation about being comfortable with ourselves. And, you know, like the journey, like Stephanie was saying about sort of transitioning from that teenager into adulthood and learning those lessons as you go along, and the insecurities that we bring with us, and then how we overcome them or we don't overcome them. And whether that sort of little bit comes with experience and age, that we kind of don't care about things as much, what other people think, that we might have thought more about.
I have a question. Hi, I'm Janet from Ottawa, Canada, and
Welcome.
thanks. I don't even know how to word this, but I guess it's to Stephanie. When you were talking about your son and the shoelaces and that he learned on his own, I guess my question is, he chose not to wear them again because he felt uncomfortable, but what's the step of saying, wear them again, no matter what? I mean, he wasn't hurting anybody. Like, that's the step that
Right.
I just want to know, what's the next step? Or is that, I mean, it's obviously it's his choice. And I'm just using this as an example, but what's the next step?
Well, I think my takeaway was that he didn't love them enough to take the risk again. And I think middle school, it's very hard to teach a middle schooler to not worry about being judged. I mean, as the every day passes, a new thing pops up. And for me as a parent, I have to let him feel that. I don't want to tell him to just keep pushing it. You know, I want him to be free to feel and explore each opportunity. So he didn't wear the shoelaces again, but he got his ear pierced. And he wears his hair long, and he wears a tie-dyed sweatshirt with pink, and he wore it to school. And he asked me, well, it's very large and it's very colorful. Is that okay? I said, yeah, it's okay. So, you know, I think the next step maybe is, like I said, I will always raise the flag if I think maybe he'll be judged, but it's up to him to make the decision to be okay with it or not. So I think that's probably the next step, really, is to bring a mindfulness to it so that he can make
I
that
guess
choice.
I was sort of asking for ourselves, not your son. I understand the middle
Oh, yeah.
school thing, but I totally understand it. But just even for us, like, I mean, maybe it's too broad, maybe it's too much for this discussion, but it's just like the next step.
Yeah, practice. Just put yourself
Practice,
out
you
there.
said that. Yeah,
Feel what does it feel like to be, if you do feel judged, if you feel like you're judged, how does that sit with you? Are you okay with it? Does it really, is it a real feeling? I mean, think about like so much stress that we carry. Is that real? It's something we're putting on our heads because we're thinking about it. But if it's not there, if we're not thinking about somebody judging us, we're not being judged. So you have to separate the thought of being judged from the feeling of being hurt and separate the two. I think that's probably.
Yeah, it's funny because as I age, I feel more judged. Like I never judged. I was sort of one of those who was very lucky. I really didn't judge a lot of people. It's kind of, I'm a hippy dippy, do your own thing. As I get older, I feel I have to fight not to judge, and I feel more judged. So I didn't judge people, so I never thought I was being judged.
Interesting.
I don't think this year has helped that
Yeah.
for a lot of us. I think the distance, we've had way too much time to spend in our own heads and make up versions of what may or may not be happening. And I think I definitely hear you, Janet. I think as I've gotten older, I see things differently than I did as a kid, and I feel there's definitely different kinds of judgment. And it's fascinating to watch how it's manifesting itself now with the choices people are making and how we define how good we've been with distancing, how good we've been with mask wearing, like about who's getting the vaccine and who's sharing they're getting the vaccine for fear that, like, well, why did she get it and why didn't I get, it's a little bit of the Hunger Games out there right now. So I think we have to be mindful that, part of it is, like Stephanie said so beautifully, we're in our own heads a lot and we create a lot of it. I mean, if you go back to what I said about saying no, I anticipate so much that saying no is going to be so much harder than when I actually get to it, it's not that hard. But it's the self-talk that I get myself all riled up about it.
I also think social media is not our friend when it comes to this.
Agreed.
I see a lot of head nods. Yeah, we know. That's why I specifically said there's no right or wrong thing to post on social media. Just if it feels like something you want to share because it feels like you're proud, you think it might inspire somebody, post it. If you want to share your feelings and pour your heart out there, if you're comfortable with that, do it. There's no judge. And I forget who it was that mentioned the Jewish values book. Major shout out for that Jewish values book, because to me, at the end of the day, God is the judge. If you want to think anybody's to judge us, let it be God. But the Jewish values book really helps you keep all of those things in check. And if you're checking in with all those values and being true to yourself, and you're kind and respectful and empathetic, do it, do what feels good. It's okay.
Well, I mean, I do think there's a lot about, you talked about in the professional space, Stephanie, versus the personal space, and there are differences, but I've tried to say to my kids to be authentic, and you use that word. And I think that is, it's good, because then you don't have to remember what you're being or who you're being authentic.
Yeah, I have a colleague of mine that joined me on the call today on this Zoom, and she can tell you I am the exact same person you're seeing here that I'm seeing it in my job. And if you can get to that point where you're really not just wearing different hats, I found that I was always putting on different hats. And if I was able to be the same person all the time, it was so much more meaningful and authentic. Again, there's always time for appropriate, but that aside.
So I have two questions I like to throw out. So one is there a place for judgment? Like it feels like it's easy to say, let's just get to the place where we're not judging, but maybe there's some role that judgment has that's actually good, one. And two is, I think that, I forgot my second point. Oh, well. Oh, yeah. So here's what I want to say. Second point is,
we're not judging you for that. Don't worry.
Thank you. I don't feel judged. The second point I have is that I think that we do wear different hats. Actually, I think that when I'm at home and I'm with my children, I'm perhaps act differently than I do with my husband, or I do differently with a stranger in the supermarket. And I think it's okay to be. We're the same person, we just reflect different expressions of ourselves out in different relationships that we have. So it's the same person and it is congruent inside outside, but it might express itself differently in different places.
We just did this great class with some of our middle schoolers. It didn't land as well with the younger ones as it did with the older ones, and that's just developmentally appropriate. But like for Purim, like the masks we wear, what's the mask that you show the rest of the world? Does it change depending on where you are? And what's the stuff you keep on the inside? And I don't think it's I think it's important as like a form of self-perfection, protection rather. There's parts of me I don't need the whole world to see, or that I reserve for my family or my nearest and dearest. And there's also like, there is a time and place where like I'm really not feeling up to doing another Zoom meeting, but I have to, so I have to fake it, like, and put on this sort of persona that and sometimes we used to say when I worked at a summer camp, it was like fake it till you make it. Often you think positively, or you've put this mask on that you need to wear, you find yourself morphing into it and putting yourself out there. And I think there's a fine line between that and authenticity. But I think for sake of self-protection, there's times where I don't want to show my true authentic self to just everybody. That's just who I am.
Right.
I would
Let them
agree
judge me
with
for
that.
it.
Yeah,
Let them judge me for it.
I don't judge you for that, first of all, and I would agree with you.
If anybody feels like they need to leave, we did reach our hour mark, so please don't feel like you have to stay. I'm feeling like the conversation is quite rich, so if you'd like to stay, you're invited to, but you're also invited to leave if you want. There was a hand up, but then the hand went down, so I don't know if that person wanted to say anything. If you do, you're welcome to unmute yourself.
I just,
Go ahead, please. No, please go ahead.
I'm Judy Mosley, but I've gone through a journey throughout the pandemic of, I've always had a self-esteem, and I think I have found I've done a couple things, but one of the main things is I've had a big weight loss, and have felt like this renewed self and more focus on myself and feeling good about myself. But also I've learned I've had to do some things to not take things personally, because I always felt it was hard for me not to take everything personally in my job or in my family life or in friends. I'm the executive director of Temple Bethel, so it's a big job and there's a lot of personalities involved. But I recently was consulted with someone, and they had this great idea that's helped me so much, besides just having more self-confidence about my own being, is I have this imaginary box I keep under my desk, and when things happen and I react personally to it, when it's a job or I've just learned to say, okay, well, that can be expected, or that's fine, let's move on. And I put it in the box and it's gone. And I try not to dwell on those things and let it eat at me. And I feel like I still have a lot of a far challenge for me to go forward and to keep doing this. But I've come so far in being able just to relax with those things, and I think it's helping me in my job, it's helping my personal life. But I definitely had to make a drastic move in just feeling better about myself, both physically and mentally. And that imaginary box helps a lot too. So it just gives me a freedom of truth to myself and say, it's not about me, and put it away and move forward. And I feel like I'm just personally, both in my job and myself, just growing so much more.
Amazing. Thank you so much for sharing that, Judy. That's really a lot that you shared. We're all behind you. We're all waving at you and applauding you. Yasha koyach. Caroline, you have a question, if you don't mind, unmute yourself.
Oh, it was actually just a comment, and you asked me to introduce myself first. Some of you I know, but I haven't seen you in a long time. My parents live in Rhode Island and have for over 20 years, so I visit frequently, and my kids and I lived there for a year. My kids were able to go to JCDS, which was wonderful.
Where do you live now?
In far away, far away, the middle of the country. But it was just, we were there for a year. I lost my train of thought. Oh, what was really interesting for me to hear is I really appreciated everything everyone had to say. But I realized that for me, I had like a reverse journey, which is that I was openly in the LGBT community for a long time. I had really short hair. I did all this activism. I ran around. I didn't have kids. It took me a long time to have kids for various reasons. And I was very openly the self that I was at that time. And there were times that there were threats to my physical safety because I kind of looked like a boy. And I was like, well, if someone kills me, they kill me. That would be awful, but it could happen. And then I chose to be a single parent. I chose to have kids on my own after the relationship I was going to have kids and didn't work out. This was many years ago. And I became much more vulnerable because I had 3 children to take care of. My financial situation became much more difficult. I had twins unexpectedly, which I didn't mind, but I didn't realize that I was losing a lot of my power. And that when someone has treated me unfairly or not well, I can't fight back very well. So, or I don't feel comfortable risking my life on the street. I mean, I'm someone who's kind of gender fluid, and I feel comfortable with the way I present myself now. I mean, when I had kids, I became more focused on being like nurturing and empathetic and that side of my personality. And that just happened to also feel more comfortable this way. But like, I used to work in an LGBT youth organization. And where I live now in the Midwest, I taught preschool at the public school, and I never told anyone I was in the LGBT community. They all assumed that I got my kids by being divorced or widowed or something along that. I mean, I didn't lie. Like if they said, are you widowed? I didn't say yes, but they just obviously had their assumptions about where my kids must have come from. And I really think that on a deep level, I'm my more authentic self. I'm more in touch with Judaism, and I don't really care about having my hair short or long at this point in my life. It just doesn't matter to me. But I realized that sometimes what happens is as we get older, we get more powerful, and sometimes something else happens and we don't, and then we can actually go in a different direction. So I think on the inside, and the people I'm close to, I mean, I'm embarrassing this to a group of people, but I don't think any of you, whatever, like I'm not worried about it, but I just noticed that I really went in a different direction where, for the sake of wanting to take care of and protect my children, and having put myself, without even realizing I was doing so, in a much more precarious position, because it's much harder to just go work and make a little extra money if you have 3 kids than if you don't, which I guess is really obvious, but you don't always realize what's, the ramifications. So I just wanted to mention that, and I appreciated hearing what everyone had to say, but it just made me think about how on the inside we can be more authentic, but we can actually, as we lose power, like I do care what people think, because if someone doesn't like something and then I don't have a job, that's a problem, or things like that. So
Carolyn, I
Yes.
hear what you're saying, because I do think you have to be authentic and true to yourself and a lot of those things. But I know when I moved from New York or wherever we were moving from at that time, I can't remember, to San Diego, I'd come out of a big giant law firm, and I was going like this and meetings, and I'd get to San Diego and I would walk into a room and everyone was like, that's a lot. We don't do it like here, there.
Yeah.
And I would say what I thought without equivocation. And that didn't always serve me that well, my authentic self. And so I literally listened to the way people talked and had to write down. I had it at the corner of my desk. It said things that I had never heard in my life before growing up in Long Island. I hear what you're saying. Tell me more about that. I had never heard anyone. I was like, why would I do that? But I had to do that because I sounded totally wrong for where I was.
Yes.
Being my authentic self, coming straight at something. No. You always came around and went it differently, and I had to learn it. And so my authentic self was not going to get me where I wanted to go. So I totally hear what you're saying.
Yes. I was just laughing because I grew up in Boston and then I lived in California for a long time, and it was the Bay Area, but I still had to really learn a whole different conversational pattern.
Cara, my question is,
Caroline,
Wait, hold on, one at a time, sorry.
I was going to say, Caroline, your being authentic, though, has a life and death consequence. So I think that is really important for us to understand. If we're white, if we're heterosexual, it's considered the norm. I mean, if my Black friends were on here, being authentic is not always an option. You were gender fluid in a time, even now it's still a challenge. I just listened to an incredible piece this morning by Shankar Vedantam, who does NPR, The Hidden Brain, and why we've had in 20 years such a change in the acceptance of the community. But we have to be aware that you being authentic, there's a physical danger with that at one point. And I'm hoping that isn't as much true, but you did what any woman on this call, on this Zoom would do, is you put your children first. And I think that is admirable and a blessing for you and your kids in the community. But I do think there is something fundamentally particular about your situation that we should all be aware of, and grateful that you shared that.
Thank you.
I agree with that. Cara, I have a question for that. I agree with what you just said, Barbara. Cara, though, I have a question for you. So when, after being in San Diego and chilling and whatever, did your authentic self evolve? Did it change? Was it like, can your authenticity, it's not only one thing, it developed into something different?
Maybe. I am still me. I just realized what is going to work for me more, and I have had to incorporate a lot of that stuff. I don't know. For me, I still, they did not move. People did not move quickly enough for me or respond to me quickly enough, and I would be like, I just have to not say anything, and that was really hard. I don't know. Did I really change? I really recognized that I needed to change the way I projected myself, but no. And Barbara, thank you. You're right. It's a fundamentally different thing. But Carolyn was talking about getting ahead and trying to provide, and I was too. I needed to make money, so it was important in my context.
I would agree. The professional scope can be very different. It has its own set of rules, unfortunately, that we have to play by sometimes to be successful. And I think perhaps, I think in my career, I've tried to choose, probably part of why I can be authentic is I've chosen roles that feel authentic to me, and teams and, the business that I'm in. So that helps. If you can guide yourself to some place that feels like that kind of good fit, that definitely makes it easier. But of course, there's always those circumstances that you have to adapt around.
Yeah, I ran into that when I moved to Washington. My Boston, Rhode Island, do it now. My snarky sarcasm Jewishness just did not play well. It did not work. And I ended up having people really offended. Like, why are you mad at me? It's like, I'm not mad at you. This is just how we talk. Anyhow, I really had to learn differently and how to pace my volume differently. I was still me, and I was still a pushy New Englander, but I did it more slowly, because if I did it at my pace, I would have alienated a whole bunch of people. When I found my synagogue, there was a substantial core of people who were from the Northeast, Philadelphia, New York, New Jersey, New Hampshire, New England, etc. Oh man, could we talk over each other? We could just, I see you laughing, Cara. We could do that whole snarky thing, and it was wonderful. It just did not play well out in the rest of the community.
Well, this is why I'm never leaving Rhode Island now, clearly.
I know, right?
I mean, what you're telling me is horror stories about the other places.
All right.
Well, Stephanie, you and I both know we both came from New York, and that was an adjustment in and of itself to come here. But I think
all of you came from New York.
Came from New York at some point.
Ex-New Yorkers.
Yeah, I think we just shouldn't confuse living out loud is equal to being your authentic self. Sometimes being authentic is just a pure understanding of self-awareness that you can also retract a little bit. The Jewish educator in me wants to bring up this concept of tzimtzum, the idea that you go within in order to repair, in order to give space to others, and to really not always be everything to all people, not always be the center of attention, not always be, sometimes speaking your truth is so important and critical, and sometimes speaking your truth is staying quiet and letting others say it in their way, and
right, or make space for others to thrive.
Right.
So that's what we're doing here, making space for others to thrive, to express themselves. But panelists, you are awesome, really. All-star, fantastic, out the ballpark. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having us.
And you know what it did is it like started the conversation that we're going to continue in our little circles, wherever we are, our big circles outside. We're going to keep thinking about it and talking about it and reflecting on it. So thank you for sharing your thoughts, and thank you everybody for coming. And I did meant to say this at the beginning, but April 22nd, Nancy Katz is going to be doing an art project with us on, again, Pesach Seder themed, which is really always a lovely event to have Nancy Katz lead us through an art project, which we'll do from the comfort of our own homes. And stay in touch with Core Connects Rhode Island. Please God, one day soon we'll meet in person and we can share food and companionship in the real. And in the meantime, I wish you all a wonderful month of Nisan and a wonderful Passover season.
Chag Kasher v'sameach, everyone.
Thank you.
Be well.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.